The guests froze as a limousine rolled to a silent stop before the Grand Connecticut estate. Flashing lights cut through the night as a woman in a deep navy gown stepped out gracefully, her heels clicking like echoes of destiny. Beside her stood a powerful billionaire with calm confidence, and two striking young men whose faces mirrored the man waiting inside. Logan Brewer's smile faded. The woman he once abandoned had returned, radiant and untouchable. Whispers spread like wildfire. Cameras flashed wildly, and as the doors to his lavish gala opened, he had no idea this night would destroy everything he built. Don't scroll. This story will move your heart and test what you believe about love, betrayal, and karma. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe for more powerful stories like this one. Like this video if you're watching on YouTube, and share it with someone who needs to believe in second chances. Drop your thoughts in the comments as the story unfolds. Your voice matters here. Now take a deep breath, sit back, and let this unforgettable journey remind you, sometimes the one who walks away in silence ends up speaking the loudest. Now let's begin. 23 years earlier, at 23, Ava Cole believed in forever. She met Logan Brewer at a New York business conference where her small architecture firm presented an eco-housing concept. He arrived late, confident and magnetic, the kind of man who filled a room without speaking. His charm swept through her like a summer storm. He praised her ideas, promised partnership, and by the end of the month, he promised love. Ava had never met anyone so sure of everything. Logan spoke about power, family, and destiny as if he controlled them all. Within 6 months, they were married in a glittering Manhattan ballroom. Marriage to Logan felt like a dream wrapped in gold. He showered Ava with roses, weekend trips to the Hamptons, and whispered plans about building their empire together. She left her modest Brooklyn studio and joined his world of tailored suits, boardroom dinners, and endless flashbulbs. For the first time, Ava's talent met opportunity. Logan introduced her to elite clients who admired her elegance. Yet behind every compliment lingered control. He often said, "You're better because of me." She laughed it off, convinced it was love. When she found out she was pregnant, he kissed her forehead, calling her his miracle. Fast forward. The twins arrived on a rainy April night. Ethan first and Evan, two perfect reflections of love she thought would last forever. Logan stood proudly by her hospital bed, flashing smiles for photographers he'd invited to capture his family's blessing. Ava cradled her sons, her heart full of gratitude. She dreamed of designing their nursery, teaching them colors, showing them the beauty of creation. Logan promised to slow down and spend time at home. But within weeks, the promises faded. Late-night calls returned, business trips multiplied, and expensive gifts replaced tenderness. Ava sensed it then. His heart was already somewhere else. By the twins' first birthday, Ava began noticing the perfume on his suits, sensed too expensive for any meeting room. Logan dismissed her questions with laughter, saying, "Jealousy doesn't suit you, Ava." The gentle husband she once adored grew distant and cold. He criticized her sketches, claiming no one cared about affordable housing for dreamers. One night, she overheard his conversation with another woman, his voice low, intimate, promising weekends away. The sound shattered her. When he returned home that evening, she looked at him differently. Not as her husband, but as a stranger wearing the face of the man she married. Ava tried to save their marriage with grace. She planned candlelit dinners, wrote heartfelt letters, and begged him to attend counseling. Logan refused, claiming busy schedules and accusing her of dramatics. His charm outside their home remained flawless, but inside, cruelty bloomed like thorns. He belittled her passion for architecture, insisting her success was a gift from his name. The more she tried to reach him, the more he withdrew. Nights grew colder. Days blurred. Her laughter faded into silence. And when another tabloid headline exposed Logan Brewer with a young socialite, Ava realized love wasn't blind. It was bleeding. The divorce papers arrived one sunny morning wrapped in an envelope embossed with his company's gold seal. Ava stood in the kitchen, the twins playing nearby as she read each word. Logan offered no apology, only division of assets and custody terms that favored him, but offered no intention to parent. Her hands trembled. She'd given everything to their marriage, yet he discarded her like an outdated contract. When he arrived to collect his suits, he barely looked at her. "You'll thank me one day," he said. She said nothing. She simply picked up Ethan, kissed Evan's cheek, and walked away. Friends urged her to fight back, but Ava refused public battles. She sold the diamond ring, the fur coats, the symbols of a dream that died. What she kept were her sketchbooks, the pages filled with designs she'd once imagined for their future. That night, under dim kitchen light, she made a decision that would define her life. She would rebuild from the ashes, not for revenge, but for her sons. She packed their belongings and left the luxury penthouse. The doorman watched silently as she stepped into a waiting cab, her twins asleep on her shoulders, her heart quietly breaking. Her new beginning started in a modest Brooklyn apartment with peeling paint and thin walls that echoed with her baby's cries. It wasn't much, but it was hers. Ava spent nights sketching, fueled by instant coffee and determination. During the day, she took small freelance design jobs, restaurants, community centers, even park benches. Every paycheck went to food, rent, and daycare. When exhaustion hit, she looked at Ethan and Evan and found new strength. The twins became her reason, her rhythm, her redemption. And though she missed sleep and warmth, she never missed hope. She swore she'd rise again, quietly, powerfully. Years passed in relentless motion. Ava built a reputation as the architect who never quit. She walked to meetings in snowstorms, defended her ideas in boardrooms filled with doubt, and delivered brilliance on shoestring budgets. Slowly, her name began to circulate. Yet even in triumph, memories of Logan haunted her. Every success reminded her of what he once claimed she couldn't achieve. She often whispered to herself, "This is for them." The twins grew fast, curious, kind, and wise beyond their years. Each time they smiled, she knew she'd made the right choice. Their laughter became her armor against every scar. On the twins' 7th birthday, Ava received a call from an event coordinator requesting her to design a local library expansion. It wasn't glamorous, but it was meaningful. As she hung up, she looked out her small window toward the city's skyline, glowing under the sunset. Somewhere out there, Logan Brewer was likely sipping champagne in another mansion, living his newest fantasy. Ava smiled softly and whispered, "One day, you'll remember who I was." Then she turned back to her drafting table. Her pencil moved with purpose, sketching lines that would one day build not just walls, but legacy. Rebuilding in New York City, Ava's career began taking shape through persistence. She worked from a small studio space she rented behind a bakery in Brooklyn, its air filled with the smell of fresh bread. Clients admired her designs for their heart and honesty. One day, a friend introduced her to a corporate contact searching for a creative mind to redesign an office tower in Manhattan. The man's name was Michael Mick Harrington, founder of Harrington Ventures, a global tech energy firm. Their first meeting wasn't glamorous. He arrived quietly, dressed simply, his voice calm but confident. He studied her sketches and said, "You design with soul." Mick's eyes carried the kind of kindness that made Ava uneasy at first. She wasn't used to men noticing her mind more than her beauty. He asked thoughtful questions: why she chose natural light, how she balanced warmth with power in design. She explained that buildings, like people, needed emotional structure. He smiled. "Then this world needs your kind of architecture." He offered her the job the next morning. It wasn't charity, it was trust. For the first time in years, Ava felt seen not as someone's ex-wife, but as a visionary. That night, she cried quietly, not from pain, but relief. The Harrington project changed everything. Ava poured every ounce of creativity into the design. Her vision transformed the cold glass structure into a living masterpiece that balanced innovation with humanity. The completed tower made headlines in architecture magazines, with Ava's name beside Mick's. Invitations began arriving from across the country. Yet she stayed humble, spending her free time with Ethan and Evan, who were now playful, intelligent boys. They adored their mother's drawings and tried to copy her sketches. When Mick visited to review progress, he always brought small gifts for the twins, science kits, puzzles, and books about great inventors. Ava noticed the quiet way Mick treated her sons, with patience, laughter, and respect. He never tried to replace their father. He simply became someone they could depend on. He attended their school art fairs, clapped the loudest at small awards, and reminded them to believe in their mother's brilliance. Over time, his visits extended beyond business. They shared dinners, walks through Central Park, and long conversations about life, loss, and rebuilding. Ava admired his sincerity. Unlike Logan, Mick didn't make promises he couldn't keep. He lived by them quietly. Without realizing it, Ava began smiling again and meaning it. One rainy evening, after a project presentation, Ava found herself stranded without an umbrella. Mick appeared beside her, holding one. They laughed as thunder rumbled over Manhattan. "You've been through storms before," he teased. She smiled softly. "Yes, but this one's gentle." They walked beneath the rain, sharing stories about dreams they'd buried and rediscovered. He told her about losing his wife years ago and raising a company from grief. Ava listened, her heart aching with empathy. That night, when she returned home, she sat beside her sleeping twins, realizing something unexpected. Mick Harrington had quietly rebuilt her belief in love. Months turned into years, and Ava's success soared. Cole's studio opened a new office near the Hudson River, employing young designers who admired her resilience. Mick continued supporting her career without overshadowing it. He introduced her at industry events as the future of architectural storytelling. Together, they became an unstoppable creative force. Yet, beneath the professional triumphs, their friendship deepened into something sacred. The twins adored Mick and often asked when he'd visit again. Ava began to notice the small things, the way his hand brushed hers when passing papers, or the warmth of his voice when he called her remarkable. By the twins' 13th birthday, Mick had become more than a friend. He was family. He attended every celebration, sitting beside Ava as if he'd always belonged there. After candles were blown, Ethan whispered, "Mom, you smile differently when he's around." She laughed, but deep inside, she knew her son saw the truth. That night, after the guests left, Mick stayed behind to help clean up. They stood in the kitchen, laughter softening the quiet. He handed her a cup of tea and said, "You built a beautiful world, Ava." She replied gently, "I didn't build it alone." Love between them didn't explode. It unfolded slowly, like dawn breaking through fog. One evening, as they reviewed sketches for a new city project, Mick paused, watching her concentration. "Do you ever rest?" he asked. "Not until my dreams do," she joked. He leaned closer. "Then I'll make sure your dreams have a home." Their eyes met, neither pulling away. For the first time since Logan, Ava allowed someone to hold her gaze without fear. When he left that night, she stood by the window, feeling something she hadn't in years. Safe, seen, and ready to love again without apology. Months later, Mick invited Ava and the twins to dinner at his penthouse overlooking Central Park. It wasn't business, it was personal. The city glittered beneath them, reflecting the warmth of new beginnings. During dessert, Mick stood, nerves hidden behind confidence. He reached into his pocket, knelt, and held out a simple gold ring. "You've already given me a family," he said softly. "Now let me give you peace." Ava froze, eyes filling with tears. The twins jumped up shouting, "Say yes, Mom." She nodded through her laughter and whispered, "Yes." For the first time in decades, happiness didn't feel borrowed. Their wedding took place quietly at Central Park Conservatory Garden under a sky painted in gold and lilac. Only close friends, her twins, and a few colleagues attended. Grace Miller, Ava's best friend, cried through the vows. Ethan and Evan stood proudly as ring bearers. Mick promised to cherish them as his own sons. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, applause filled the garden. Ava leaned into Mick's embrace and whispered, "You've healed what I thought was broken forever." The moment felt sacred. No cameras, no headlines, just family peace and a love story rewritten by forgiveness and grace. Love and marriage. Marriage to Mick was built on peace, not power. Their mornings began with laughter echoing through the penthouse kitchen, the smell of coffee mingling with sunlight. Ava continued designing iconic buildings. while Mick quietly handled business meetings across the world. Every night, they met at the same spot on the balcony overlooking Central Park, sharing stories about their day. Ethan and Evan thrived under their love, both excelling in school and dreaming big. To the world, they looked like perfection, but to Ava, it was simply freedom. She no longer needed to prove herself to anyone. She had already won. Years passed with rhythm and grace. Ethan, now studying architecture at NYU, often joined his mother at the studio, sketching beside her. Evan, a business student at Columbia, shadowed Mick during meetings, learning negotiation and leadership. Together, they were a family shaped by love and purpose. Ava's projects expanded across the country, earning her international acclaim. She was invited to speak at design conferences, praised for her creativity and emotional intelligence. Yet, in her quiet moments, she sometimes wondered if Logan ever thought about them. The thought never lingered long, because every time Mick smiled at her, the past lost its power. On a warm Friday evening, Ava sat on a balcony with Mick, the city lights dancing below. "You've built a legacy," he said softly, his arm around her shoulders. She smiled. "No, we did." He kissed her forehead, eyes filled with admiration. The twins had grown into confident young men, grounded by love. "They're ready for the world," Ava whispered. "And so are we," Mick replied. As they laughed, a gentle breeze carried the distant sounds of sirens and music. Ava closed her eyes and thought of how far she'd come, from heartbreak to healing. For once, life felt beautifully simple. The next morning, Ava arrived at her office to find Grace Miller holding a gold-embossed envelope. "It came for you," Grace said, curious. The handwriting was familiar, sharp, deliberate. Ava hesitated before opening it. Inside, an invitation shimmered under the light. "You are cordially invited to the pre-wedding gala of Logan Brewer and Vanessa Reed." Her fingers froze. Grace gasped, "Your ex-husband?" Ava forced a smile. Apparently, he's still chasing perfection. She tucked the invitation into her purse. But as she stared out the window toward the skyline, something deep inside stirred. Memories she thought she'd buried began whispering again. That night, Ava told Mick about the invitation. He listened quietly, his expression unreadable. "Do you want to go?" he asked gently. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "Part of me doesn't care, but another part wants him to see I survived." Mick smiled. "You didn't survive. Ava, you conquered." He took her hand. "If you go, don't go for him. Go for you." His calm voice steadied her. She nodded slowly, realizing it wasn't revenge calling. It was closure. Still, something about Logan's handwriting, his tone, and the audacity to invite her after 20 years left her spirit trembling with disbelief. Later that night, Ethan and Evan sat beside their mother, reading the invitation aloud and exchanging glances. "He's really getting married again?" Evan asked, half amused. "Some men never change," Ethan muttered. Mick leaned against the wall, watching them silently. Evan looked at his mother. "Mom, let's go." She raised an eyebrow. "Why?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Because people like him think silence means defeat. Maybe it's time he sees what victory looks like." Ava laughed softly. "You two sound like me." The twins grinned. "We learn from the best." She sighed, touched by their loyalty, and whispered, "Maybe you're right." Over the next few days, Ava remained thoughtful. Grace encouraged her to attend, reminding her that confidence was the best revenge. Ava finally agreed, but not to flaunt her life. She wanted to face her past with Grace. She told Mick her decision, and he simply smiled. "Then let's make the night unforgettable." He arranged everything: transportation, wardrobe, and security. The gala, scheduled for the following Saturday, promised luxury and headlines. Ava stared at the shimmering invitation one last time before placing it inside a book. "Let him see peace," she whispered to herself, "because peace is the loudest victory." Preparations began days before the gala. Ava visited a boutique on Fifth Avenue, where cameras flashed as she entered with Grace. She chose a deep navy gown with a soft shimmer that hugged her gracefully, symbolizing strength. Mick waited patiently nearby, admiring her reflection in the mirror. "You look timeless," he said, his tone warm. She smiled. "And you still look like the man who never doubted me." Outside, the twins were being fitted for tuxedos, Ethan adjusting his cufflinks, Evan teasing him in laughter. As the stylist finished, Ava looked at her family and whispered silently, "This time, I walk in whole." On the night of the gala, a cold breeze swept through Manhattan. The limo waited at the curb, gleaming under streetlights. Ava stepped out of the building, her gown flowing like midnight silk. Mick, dressed in a tailored black tuxedo, offered his hand. The twins followed, handsome, confident, reflections of both her pain and her victory. Grace waved from the doorway, teary-eyed. "Show them who you are," she called. Ava smiled and nodded. Inside the limo, Mick placed his hand over hers. "No nerves?" he asked. She shook her head. "None." For the first time, she meant it completely. As the limousine rolled toward the Connecticut mansion, the city lights faded into moonlit silence. Ava watched her reflection in the tinted window, the same woman Logan once abandoned, now transformed into Grace personified. Ethan leaned forward. "Mom." She met his eyes. "Whatever happens tonight," he said, "we're with you." Evan nodded firmly. Mick squeezed her hand gently. "You're not facing your past," he whispered. "Your past is about to face you." Ava smiled faintly. The road curved through tall oaks leading to glowing gates ahead. Beyond them waited the man who once broke her, and the night that would break him. The invitation. The Brewer estate blazed with golden lights, its marble columns gleaming under chandeliers that reflected the wealth Logan worshipped. Expensive cars lined the driveway, and guests arrived in diamonds and tuxedos. Inside, soft jazz flowed through the hall as waiters passed champagne on silver trays. The crowd buzzed with excitement over the city's most talked-about wedding. When the limousine finally pulled up, all heads turned. The door opened slowly, revealing Ava Cole in her navy gown, Mick Harrington's hand steadied her side, and their twin sons following confidently behind. Conversations halted. Logan Brewer's heart skipped a violent, trembling beat. Logan stood frozen at the grand staircase, champagne glass in hand, his fiancée Vanessa Reed beside him. For years, he'd told himself Ava had vanished into insignificance. But as she entered the mansion, graceful and radiant, reality hit harder than memory. Vanessa leaned closer, whispering, "Who is she?" Logan's throat tightened. "Someone I used to know." Cameras flashed as Ava's name swept through the guests like wildfire. Her calm smile pierced through the crowd's curiosity. She wasn't a woman he left crying in court. She was power wrapped in elegance. Logan gripped his glass tighter, wondering how one night could already burn. Vanessa studied Logan's expression, confusion flickering in her sharp eyes. "You're acting strange," she murmured. Logan forced a smile, adjusting his cufflinks. "Just old memories," he replied coldly. Meanwhile, Ava and Mick moved through the crowd like royalty, greeting familiar faces from the business world. People whispered behind jeweled hands, some admiring, others jealous. The twins stood tall, politely nodding to guests who stared at them, unaware they were Logan's blood. Gracefully, Ava accepted a glass of wine from a waiter and looked around the hall. Her eyes met Logan's across the room for the first time in 20 years. Silence. The air thickened between them. Logan's mind raced through decades of denial, guilt, and regret. Ava, however, looked at him with nothing but peace. She didn't flinch, didn't frown. She simply acknowledged him and turned away, her composure louder than anger. Mick noticed a moment but said nothing, his hand resting gently on her back. Vanessa watched the silent exchange, unease creeping into her smile. "You should go greet her," she teased. Logan smirked. "She's not worth it." But as Ava's laughter filled the room moments later, light and free, Logan realized the truth. He had spent 20 years chasing shadows. The evening unfolded in elegance. The band played softly as guests mingled under crystal chandeliers. Waiters moved gracefully, and photographers snapped candid shots. Yet, every time Ava crossed the room, eyes followed her. She didn't need an introduction. Her presence spoke for itself. "Is that Ava Cole, the architect?" Someone whispered. Her firm built the Liberty Pavilion downtown. Pride flickered in Mick's eyes as he watched her own the room with grace. The twins stayed near, observing their mother's poise with admiration. Logan, meanwhile, forced laughter beside Vanessa, masking his unease with pride. Beneath the surface, jealousy coiled like a sleeping serpent. An hour later, Ava excused herself to step outside for air. The night breeze brushed her skin, carrying faint music from the ballroom. She stood on the terrace, overlooking the moonlit gardens, lost in reflection. "You look at peace," Mick said, joining her quietly. She nodded. "I am." He took her hand. "No one can take this from you again." Ava smiled. Not even him. Behind them, through the glass doors, Logan's eyes found them, Ava's calm against Mick's steady warmth. The image twisted his chest painfully. Vanessa noticed his stare, her smile faltering. Jealousy began eating through her glittering mask. Inside, the evening's program began. A host announced a special tribute by Logan Brewer to honor resilience and strength. The guests applauded politely. Ava returned to her table with Mick and the twins, unaware she was the unspoken subject. Vanessa sat nearby, her gaze icy, still dissecting every glance between Logan and Ava. The lights dimmed slightly as Logan stepped forward, microphone in hand. He smiled, charming as ever, and began, "Tonight isn't only about love. It's about growth, lessons, and the kind of strength that failure teaches." The crowd nodded approvingly. Ava listened carefully, feeling a chill beneath his tone. Logan's words dripped with charisma. "Sometimes," he continued, "we meet people who help us grow, even if they're not meant to stay." His smirk deepened. Some build their lives on sympathy, pretending success belongs to them. But true strength, true success, comes from knowing you were always the reason they survived. A murmur rippled through the audience. Mick's expression darkened. Ava's grip on her glass tightened, though her face stayed composed. The twins exchanged tense glances. Logan turned toward Ava's table, his voice colder now. "And to those who once walked away, thank you. You reminded me that diamonds shine brightest alone." The room stiffened with discomfort. Some guests looked away, realizing his words were aimed at Ava. Vanessa blinked in shock, her jaw slightly open. Ava didn't move. She simply placed her wine glass down gently, her composure unsettling. Ethan's pulse quickened as fury burned his chest. Evan leaned closer. "Don't," he whispered. Ethan clenched his fist but stayed silent. Logan continued his speech with arrogance, basking in shallow applause. Yet deep inside, he felt something shift. The crowd wasn't smiling with admiration. They were staring with quiet judgment. Still, he forced a grin, unaware that humiliation was already approaching. When the applause ended, Ava rose gracefully. The twins watched her, waiting. She turned to Mick, who gave a reassuring nod. Then, without saying a word, she walked toward the exit, her posture poised and regal. Gasps whispered through the room. Her silence spoke louder than any confrontation could. Logan's smirk faltered. Vanessa's stare followed Ava's every step. Mick stood calmly, proud of his wife's strength. "That," he whispered to the twins, "is what power looks like." Ethan's eyes shimmered with restrained emotion. Evan exhaled slowly. As Ava disappeared through the terrace doors, a storm was already gathering beneath the glittering chandeliers. The speech. Outside, Ava stood under the moonlight, breathing deeply, letting the cold air steady her emotions. She didn't need to retaliate. Her silence was her statement. Through the tall windows, she saw Logan accepting handshakes, pretending victory. Mick joined her, his voice calm. "You handled that with grace." She smiled faintly. "I learned from the best pain." Inside, the twins' patience thinned. Ethan's jaw clenched as he watched his father bask in fake admiration. Evan whispered, "He's not worth it." But Ethan shook his head. "It's not about him anymore. It's about her." He rose from his chair, determination burning quietly. Ethan stepped forward before the audience could disperse. The chatter faded as he approached the microphone left behind by Logan. "Excuse me," he said, voice firm yet trembling slightly. Every head turned toward him. Logan frowned, confused. "Young man, this isn't." Ethan raised a hand. "I know who you are, Mr. Brewer." A ripple of whispers filled the air. "And I know who my mother is." His tone sharpened. "You said success comes from strength? Then let me tell you about the strongest person in this room." Silence spread like wildfire. Ava's eyes widened from the terrace, her heart pounding. "She built her life from ashes," Ethan continued, his voice steadying. "When you left her, she carried 2 babies on her back, worked 3 jobs, and still smiled. You mocked her struggle, but that struggle built the woman the world now calls a legend." Guests exchanged shocked looks. Whispers turned to gasps. Logan's face stiffened as recognition dawned. Those eyes, that voice, it was undeniable. Ethan took a deep breath, emotion trembling in his tone. "You were supposed to protect her, but you abandoned her instead. And the irony?" He paused, looking directly at Logan. "You abandoned me and my brother." The hall erupted in disbelief. Vanessa's hand flew to her mouth, whispering, "Your sons?" Logan's complexion drained to gray. His glass shattered on the marble floor, echoing through the room. Evan stood next to his brother, calm and unshaken. "Maybe if you hadn't chased fame," he said evenly, "you would have recognized your reflection tonight." Guests stared at the twins, both tall, confident, and striking images of Logan's youth. Mick entered the room quietly, placing a steadying hand on Ava's shoulder. She stayed still, her eyes locked on a man who once promised her forever. Logan's world began cracking in silence. Logan took a step forward, his voice trembling. "This is absurd," he snapped, attempting control. "You think—" "We know," Ethan interrupted sharply. "You think you can erase 20 years of absence with money and arrogance? You can't buy back time, Mr. Brewer." Gasps scattered through the audience. Vanessa's eyes watered, anger and disgust mixing in disbelief. "You lied to me," she whispered. Logan ignored her, still staring at his sons. For the first time, pride failed him. "You're both," he stammered, unable to finish. Evan nodded coldly. "Yes, we're the legacy you walked away from, the one you'll never get back." Reporters lifted their phones, cameras flashing furiously as whispers spread like wildfire. Guests exchanged uneasy glances, realizing the gala had turned into a reckoning. Logan's fiancée stepped backward, shame written across her face. "You humiliated me tonight," she hissed before storming out. Logan tried to speak, but his voice cracked. "Ava," he managed weakly, glancing toward the terrace. She stood still, her expression unreadable, neither hatred nor pity. She didn't need to speak. Her silence suffocated him more than words could. For the first time in his empire-driven life, Logan Brewer felt powerless, surrounded not by admiration, but by quiet condemnation. Mick stepped forward slowly, his polished shoes echoing against the marble. The crowd parted instinctively, sensing the weight of what was coming. His presence commanded respect without raising his voice. "Logan Brewer," he said calmly, "I came here to support my wife." The word wife landed like thunder. Logan's head snapped toward him. "Wife?" Mick nodded, eyes unwavering. "You once threw her away like she was replaceable. You told the world she'd never succeed without your name." He paused. "You were wrong." The room grew still. Cameras clicked softly. Mick's tone remained steady. "She doesn't just bear your name, she erased it." Mick turned slightly toward the audience, his composure radiating authority. "Some men build empires to be remembered," he continued. "Others build legacies that live through love." His gaze returned to Logan. "You built an empire that ended tonight." A collective gasp filled the room. "Because starting tomorrow," Mick said, his voice low but clear, "Harrington Ventures will finalize its acquisition of Brewer Capital." Logan's breath caught. "What?" he whispered, disbelief overtaking arrogance. Mick's tone stayed composed. "It's poetic, really. The woman you tried to destroy now owns a company you worship more than your family." Cameras flashed. Logan's knees weakened. The audience erupted into whispers, a mix of shock and awe. Reporters scribbled furiously. Vanessa's voice echoed faintly from the hall, shouting at staff to cancel the wedding. Logan stood motionless, staring at the man beside the woman he once claimed as his. "You planned this," he muttered bitterly. Mick's eyes stayed calm. No, Logan. Karma did. The guest began to applaud softly, turning toward Ava, whose quiet dignity spoke volumes. She didn't smile, didn't gloat. She simply looked at Logan one last time. That look carried 23 years of strength, pain, and peace. He looked away, unable to meet it. Security escorted journalists outside as the gala unraveled. The band stopped playing. Logan remained rooted in place, surrounded by fragments of his shattered pride. The twins stood beside Ava protectively, and Mick reached for her hand. "It's over," he whispered. Ava nodded softly. "No," she said, her eyes on Logan. "It just began for him." With that, she turned and walked toward the exit, her family following closely behind. Cameras flashed one last time, capturing her poised stride under the grand chandelier. Behind her, Logan fell into a chair, trembling. The man who once ruled everything was now ruled by regret. Truth and karma. The next morning, headlines flooded every major news outlet. Billionaire Logan Brewer exposed at his own gala. Photographs showed his stunned expression, frozen mid-defeat. The internet exploded with admiration for Ava Cole, the woman who turned pain into power without uttering a single cruel word. Reporters called her the face of silent strength. Meanwhile, Ava sat at home beside Mick, sipping coffee as sunlight poured through their glass balcony. She scrolled past the headlines quietly. Mick smiled. "You handled it perfectly." She nodded. "I didn't fight him. I just showed him the truth." Her peace spoke louder than his empire ever could. Logan's world collapsed within days. Investors withdrew. Board members resigned. Lawsuits followed as shady business dealings surfaced. The same newspapers that once praised him now call him a fallen titan. Alone in his office, Logan stared at the skyline that used to symbolize victory. Now, every tower reminded him of Ava's resilience. He thought about her composure, the way she walked away with grace when revenge was within reach. The silence she left behind was haunting. He whispered her name for the first time in years, but even the sound felt foreign. The empire he worshipped had turned into a cage. Meanwhile, Ava's phone buzzed nonstop. Media requests, interviews, talk show invitations, but she ignored them all. She didn't need attention. Her story had already spoken for itself. Ethan and Evan helped to prepare for a new award ceremony recognizing her firm's humanitarian projects. "Mom," Evan said softly, "you inspired millions last night." Ava smiled, hugging him. "No, I just reminded people that walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom." Ethan looked proud. He finally saw what he lost. She shook her head gently. "He didn't lose me," she said. "He let me go and I found myself." Mick, watching quietly, smiled with quiet admiration. The following week, Logan attended a shareholder meeting meant to save his collapsing company. The room buzzed with tension. Cameras weren't allowed, but whispers leaked outside. Brewer Capital has officially been absorbed by Harrington Ventures, announced a new board chair. Logan clenched his fists under the table. He wanted to speak, but his voice betrayed him. When the meeting adjourned, he walked through the empty lobby alone. The marble floor echoed his footsteps like reminders of everything he'd destroyed. His reflection in the glass doors looked hollow, aged, defeated, and unrecognizable. For the first time, he truly saw himself without illusions. That night, he returned to the same mansion where the gala had taken place. The lights were dim now, the laughter gone. Half-empty champagne glasses still stood where guests once celebrated. Logan sat at the piano, his hands trembling above the keys. He remembered how he'd mocked Ava in that very room, how her silence had turned his arrogance into humiliation. Tears welled in his eyes, shocking him. "I had everything," he whispered. His own voice cracked. "And I threw it away." Outside, rain began to fall heavily, tapping against the windows like the universe echoing every mistake he'd ever made. Across the city, Ava attended the Architects of Tomorrow Gala with Mick and the twins. Cameras flashed as she stepped onto stage to receive the Lifetime Inspiration Award. The audience rose in thunderous applause. Her speech was short but powerful. Strength isn't measured by what we hold on to, but by what we release. Forgiveness isn't weakness, it's freedom. Her words silenced the hall. The twins wiped tears proudly. Mick's eyes glistened as he clapped. Ava's voice wavered slightly at the end. To every woman who's ever been told she couldn't rise, you already have. The proof is your own heartbeat. After the ceremony, Ava and her family shared dinner at a quiet rooftop restaurant overlooking Manhattan. The city lights shimmered like a crown beneath the night sky. "How does it feel?" Ethan asked. Ava smiled softly. "Like peace finally caught up to me." Mick raised a glass. "To peace, then, and to the strength that brought us here." They toasted, laughter mingling with the sound of distant music. For a brief moment, Ava glanced toward the skyline, where one of Logan's unfinished skyscrapers still stood half complete. She didn't feel bitterness, only closure. The city had always been hers. Now, so was her story. Back in Connecticut, Logan walked through the empty halls of his once grand mansion, now stripped of art and luxury. He paused before a framed photo of himself from years ago, smiling, arrogant, unstoppable. He smashed it to the floor. "You ruined her," he muttered, staring at his reflection in the broken glass. His phone buzzed on the table. A news headline about Ava's award. He picked it up, staring at her picture beside Mick and their sons. His chest tightened. "You deserve it," he whispered, tears falling freely. For the first time in decades, he didn't feel powerful. He just felt human. Days turned into weeks. Ava returned to her normal rhythm. Morning coffee, client meetings, long walks with Mick. Life had resumed its natural balance. Grace called often, teasing, "You become a legend, Ava Cole." She always replied with humility, "I'm just a woman who refused a break." Meanwhile, the twins graduated top of their classes, their success proof of Ava's sacrifice. At their ceremony, she stood proudly between Mick and the boys, holding their hands tightly. Cameras flashed again, but this time, she smiled without nerves. Her family was her empire, and this time, no one could ever take it away. That evening back home, Ava sat by the window, sketching her next project as twilight painted the city gold. Mick approached quietly, wrapping his arms around her shoulders. "You changed the meaning of revenge," he said softly. She smiled. "I didn't need revenge. I just needed peace." Outside, the skyline shimmered with her buildings, symbols of endurance and rebirth. She leaned her head on Mick's chest, closing her eyes. "He'll remember me forever," she whispered. Mick kissed her hair gently. "Yes, but not for what you did to him, for what you became without him." Ava smiled faintly. "That's enough for me." Regret. Months passed, and Logan's name disappeared from business headlines. The mansion was eventually sold, his assets liquidated to cover debts. He rented a small apartment downtown, surrounded by silence that once terrified him. Each morning, he walked past newsstands displaying Ava's smiling face beside awards and magazine covers. Her success haunted him, but not with anger. It was remorse. He'd once believed power defined greatness, yet the woman he underestimated had built her legacy on grace. Sitting by the window with an untouched cup of coffee, he whispered, "She never needed to destroy me. Her silence did it better." Meanwhile, Ava continued flourishing, her architecture firm expanding internationally. Her designs became symbols of resilience, often nicknamed structures of hope. Invitations poured in for global projects, but she stayed grounded. She dedicated every achievement to her family, never letting fame consume her. Ethan opened his own studio branch, while Evan joined Mick's company, proving her influence reached beyond blueprints. During one interview, a reporter asked, "Do you ever think about your past?" Ava smiled calmly. "No, I only think about what the pain taught me." The clip went viral. The world admired her grace. Logan watched silently, his heart quietly breaking. On a cold winter evening, Logan found himself driving aimlessly through the city. His hands trembled on the steering wheel as he passed one of Ava's latest creations, a breathtaking community center shining with glass and light. A plaque near the entrance read, "Designed by Ava Cole Harrington, built to inspire strength." He stepped out, walking slowly toward the entrance. Children played inside, laughter echoing like distant memories. For the first time in years, Logan smiled, a sad, broken smile. He realized then that her success wasn't revenge. It was redemption. And redemption was something his wealth could never buy. That night, Logan returned home and opened an old wooden box buried in his closet. Inside were photographs from his past, his wedding with Ava, the twins as babies, and her early sketches. He stared at one picture of her holding Ethan and Evan in the hospital, her eyes tired but full of joy. A tear rolled down his cheek. "You were always enough," he whispered to the empty room. He folded the photograph carefully and placed it on the table beside his bed. For the first time, he prayed, not for success, but for forgiveness from the woman who never sought revenge. Spring arrived in New York, breathing warmth back into the city. Ava's firm hosted a charity exhibition showcasing young architects from disadvantaged backgrounds. She walked through the gallery, proud of the new generation rising behind her. Grace nudged her playfully. "You've started a movement." Ava laughed. "I just gave them the push I never had." Mick approached, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "And that's what makes you unforgettable." The twins joined them moments later, smiling proudly. As cameras clicked, Ava stood surrounded by love, legacy, and light. Her scars had turned into blueprints for others to build from. Elsewhere, Logan watched the event on television. His apartment dimmed except for the flickering screen. He saw Ava's radiant smile, the twins standing beside her, and Mick's steady hand resting on her back. There was no bitterness left, only awe. "She finally found happiness," he murmured. His voice cracked. "And I finally found the truth." He turned off the TV and stared at the ceiling, letting silence swallow him. The world no longer knew Logan Brewer the tycoon. They only knew the woman he once broke. And in some twisted poetry of fate, that was how he wanted to be remembered. Weeks later, Logan received an invitation in the mail, a public announcement celebrating the Ava Cole Foundation for Architectural Education. It was signed by Ethan and Evan Cole Harrington. His hands shook as he held the card. No bitterness, no anger, just pride. He whispered, "You raise good men, Ava." He placed the invitation on his desk, staring at it for hours. Though he knew he'd never attend, it gave him peace knowing his sons had become everything he couldn't be. That night, for the first time in years, he slept deeply, dreaming not of wealth or power, but the family he lost. The foundation's grand opening drew hundreds of guests, with Ava delivering another heartfelt speech about strength and compassion. She ended it with a quiet promise. Every design begins with hope, and hope begins with healing. The audience rose in thunderous applause. Ethan and Evan flanked her proudly as Mick watched from the front row, tears in his eyes. As photographers captured the moment, sunlight filtered through the glass roof, casting golden light over them. The world saw success, but Ava saw something deeper, a family that love rebuilt. In that instant, her journey was no longer about pain. It was about peace. Months later, Logan's health began to fail quietly. He spent his final days surrounded by solitude and reflection. One evening, as the sun sank below the horizon, he scribbled a note with shaking hands. "Ava, thank you for teaching me that silence can be love too." He folded it carefully and placed it inside the same box that held their old photos. When the light faded completely, he closed his eyes with a faint smile, at peace, not from wealth, but from finally understanding humility. Outside, the wind whispered softly through the trees, carrying fragments of forgiveness into the night. Weeks later, Ava stood on her balcony overlooking the glittering city she helped shape. The skyline glowed with towers that bore her mark, her name, and her legacy. Ethan and Evan laughed behind her as Mick approached, wrapping her gently in his arms. "You did it," he whispered. Ava smiled faintly. "No, we did." Together, they gazed across New York, their story written in light and steel. The past no longer haunted her. It had become her greatest teacher. Her voice broke the silence, soft yet powerful. And in the end, dignity always speaks louder than revenge. The night answered with peace.